così. Vado. Che vuol dire? Così? No.
Sediamo perché abbiamo la sala non fino a domattina, cominciamo subito. Sono qui con Elio Guizzoni che rappresenta Schirà, che ha pubblicato questo libro fantastico sulla mostra di Antony Gormley nella Galleria Continua di Pechino, e grande Stephen Greenblatt dicevo dei suoi libri. Vi invito cercare perché è un bellissimo libro, e anche a seguire quello che lui ha scritto su molti argomenti fondamentali. Do un saluto a Edo e poi andiamo avanti, è più verde.
Super, buonasera, parlerò in inglese perché abbiamo degli ospiti internazionali. Very nice to see you all this evening. Thank you for joining us. My name is Eduardo and I work for Skira, the art publisher which produced this magnificent book on Antony Gormley called Body Buildings. Just a very short introduction. The book fundamentally explores our relationship as human beings to buildings, in fact, and it was published for the exhibition in Beijing at Galleria Continua devoted to Antony Gormley. And the book explores and narrates this magnificent exhibition focusing on the artist's installations, his sculptures, and also presents some drawings that were never exhibited before. And it contains an important contribution by Professor Stephen Greenblatt, whom I'm sure you all know as a famous National Book Award and Pulitzer Prize winner, the author of, I believe, 14 books. And in his essay, Stephen Greenblatt explores not only the exhibition and the themes it raises, but also Antony Gormley's 30-year engagement and relationship to China, a country which has been profoundly influential in his art practice. I will now leave you to discover the book through a conversation between Mario Cristiani, the co-founder of Galleria Continua and president of Arte, Associazione Continua, and Stephen himself. Please do explore the book, which is at the back of the room, or also inside the bookshop on the ground floor. Please take a copy home with you this evening. Grazie a tutti e buona serata.
Allora, sì, io faccio un po'. Io parlo in italiano perché il mio inglese è troppo esaltante, quindi parliamo l'italiano è un po' più semplice forse, anche se alcuni amici dicono che quando parlo non italiano si capisce meglio. E sono appunto uno dei 3 fondatori di Galleria Continua insieme all'altro entusiasti a Maurizio Di Gillo, e sono presidente dell'Associazione Arte Continua, perché in questo caso è importante, perché io e Antony Gormley l'ho incontrato nel progetto di Arte all'Arte che era stato realizzato dall'Associazione Arte Continua al mondo, la Galleria Continua, e con Antony è nata un'amicizia. Io dovrei fare vedere le immagini, non so come modo diciamo, che ci sia la possibilità per chi non poteva venire oggi, visto che con la morte di Papa Francesco e con l'arrivo delle vacanze, insomma, molte persone non sono potute venire, però vi ringrazio tutti di essere qua perché vedo felicemente numerosi. Questa è la prima volta che ho incontrato Antony a Londra, era il 2003, 2004. Facevamo questa raccolta di fondi anche per Pino Maleato, lui è lì, ma io non l'avevo mai visto, diciamo, in volto, quindi non sapevo chi fosse. Era un James Button, che era amico di Mimo Palladino, che aveva donato delle opere alla città di Poggibonsi. Il 7 di giugno siete invitati a venire alla cittadinanza onoraria di Mimmo, e quindi lui arriva molto solidale, molto felice di questo incontro, e l'anno successivo, nel 2004, viene a Poggibonsi e appunto dopo una frequentazione della città decide, sotto mia preghiera in ginocchio, di regalare delle opere alla città, e con Stephen siamo andati a vederle. Non è, diciamo, la richiesta di partecipare al progetto con Antony da parte mia è nata proprio perché lui ha conosciuto telefonicamente Antony e poi è venuto a vedere le opere. Quindi io avevo letto il libro che vedete lì, che si intitola Ascesa e caduta di Adamo ed Eva, che è un libro fondamentale che vi invito appunto a leggere, in cui lui parla di questi due miti fondatori, diciamo, la città di Babilonia, quindi la cultura della città, e contrapposta alla Bibbia, quindi al paradiso, al giardino, quindi l'inizio della civiltà, diciamo, dell'umanizzazione dello spazio, della presenza dell'uomo nel mondo, della città, nasce appunto questa divulgazione, e quindi ispirato da questo testo parla con Antony. Loro si erano già sentiti tra di loro per altre questioni legate all'intelligenza artificiale, e da lì è nata poi l'accettazione da parte di Stephen di questa committenza. Questa mostra per me è molto importante perché appunto, come avete visto, nel 2016 Antony in Galleria Continua a Pechino realizza questo lago, diciamo, questo lago d'acqua, l'inizio, diciamo, di quello che nella nostra cultura, diciamo, occidentale è appunto gli elementi primordiali, quindi l'acqua e la terra. Qui ci sono 100.000 litri d'acqua dell'oceano cinese e non so quante tonnellate di terra, sempre per il cinese, che poi diventano nel progetto successivo, e queste sono altre opere che si sono fatte in Cina, diventano questo rest in place di cui magari appunto meglio parlerà Stephen. Queste sono delle opere che abbiamo fatto tra la Galleria e l'Associazione sia in Cina che anche in altre parti. Questa era l'installazione che si poteva vedere fino a qualche giorno fa a Pechino, e si chiama Rest in Place 2 perché la prima fu fatta alla Club a Londra. Era un'installazione, diciamo, che però richiamava soprattutto, come dire, appunto dalle parole di Antony, cioè richiamava più la crisi, diciamo, degli immigrati o delle persone appunto che vivono per strada, mentre in Cina, essendo la galleria su 3 piani, come potrete vedere nel catalogo, dava più l'impressione di essere qualcuno che stava a prendere il sole. Quindi il contesto cambia la situazione, ma quello che per me è importante è quello che rimane un po' legato alla questione anche della nascita, dell'umanizzazione e anche del lavoro che fa Antony, anche di quello che io sostengo sia nella galleria che nell'associazione riguarda dove viviamo ora, cioè qual è la nostra posizione nel mondo, in quale modo l'uomo, diciamo, ha costruito degli spazi che gli corrispondono o non gli corrispondono, e quindi, diciamo così, questo labirinto di figure, queste opere, diciamo così, che bastava sfiorarle per farle cadere, portano, diciamo, alla necessità di fare attenzione a dove ci posizioniamo e come stiamo nello spazio nostro interiore e anche nello spazio interiore degli altri, anche in come facciamo le città. È una questione, diciamo, che per me è la questione, cioè io ho cominciato questo lavoro perché avrei voluto una città come San Gimignano con quegli artisti di ora, dove è normale e gratuito che trovi l'arte dei più importanti dove vivi. Quindi tutta questa cosa qui, diciamo, volevo condividerla con voi e questo mi avvicina anche molto a quello che Stephen porta nei suoi libri, cioè come la coscienza individuale, come la nostra esperienza personale diventa libertà e gratuità e generosità. E per questo anche Antony per me è un artista emblematico, perché nel suo lavoro ci sono tutte queste cose. Bene, direi che adesso lascio la parola a lui che è più bravo, è più bello, grazie.
The first time I saw Antony Gormley's sculptures was in Oggi, thanks to an invitation from Mario, and we were amazed, my wife and I were both amazed by this, as you've already seen in the images that Mario showed you, by their presence, their intimacy, their interactive presence on the platform of the train station, in the square, on top of the building looking down at us, their peculiar intensity built out of such simple elements, so magically, seemingly easy and yet complicated and exciting. And then when Mario asked me to write something about body buildings, I very gladly consented, even though I was not able to go to Beijing, unfortunately. But when I first saw what you've just seen, the images from the exhibition, I was taken aback because they looked like this. Not from up above, where you just saw them with the people in the exhibition, but from the ground, they looked like a building site. They looked like stones that you would see if you walk past somewhere where they're doing building, and sometimes they give you a little hole so you can look through and look at the objects in the building site, and you just see stones sitting there randomly. There's a certain fascination to a building site, because you can imagine that something is eventually going to come from this, but you don't know what's going to come from the bricks, the blocks that are sitting on the ground. And then sometimes, as in this image, the building site morphs or is transitioned into what looks like a ruin. So in addition to looking like a building site, of which there historically must have been many as well as there are today, when in the case of China, when they were building the Great Wall, in addition to a building site, you get similar glimpse of what looked at first like what Antony Gormley had done, which is to say a ruin. A ruin of which, of course, we're in the presence of many, but they exist all over the world, but this is much more local. We see innumerable ones of this kind of just blocks on the ground, and you again can conjure up the sense that there was once something there, but it's now fallen. All the figures in Antony Gormley's body buildings appear to have fallen to be on the ground. And that that sense of a ruin, of an archaeological dig, was haunting, as if there was once a city, as if there was once a temple there, as if there, perhaps also because archaeological ruins always give you a sense of mortality, of death, as if there had been a battle. And these are bodies that lie on the ground. So that was my first impression, as they say, from looking at the photographs at the lower level, not from above, but just from the ground, that this was either a building site of ruin or the remains of a battle. In the period that I studied, which is to say the 16th century, 15th and 16th century, at the end of battles, there were corpses on the ground, and people would go through and take the armor and the clothes off the bodies, so the bodies were naked on the battlefield the day after a battle. And then I had that eerie feeling from looking at what Antony Gormley had done, that I was looking at naked, dead figures. But then, more happily, I thought, where else do we see naked or quasi-naked figures? What's the other place in which one can see them when one doesn't have to feel so desperate and melancholy? And that is at the beach. So there was also a sense that what I was looking at in the photographs of bodybuilding were the multiple shapes and forms of supine figures of people lying on the beach, and especially because, as you saw from the photograph, people have to step over these figures. You saw people in the photograph stepping over the bodies of Antony Gormley. That's part of the thrill, really, of the exhibition, was that you allowed people into the space and they had to move around the bodies. Beaches are one of the places at which one can see the shapes of human bodies, and of course, you feel the complexity of them also in medical settings and hospitals, in this drawing by Galen, or in more contemporary ways of representing the body, of seeing their insides and outsides, of seeing their shapes, of seeing their surfaces and their depths. And in all of these sites, you begin to think of how the body is organized. How is it put together? And in the context, particular context of the exhibition in China, there's a special way of thinking about the body, and it's this, and not the clay figures that you've seen, but the metal figures in the bodybuilding's exhibition seem to evoke the Chinese meridian channels that track in Chinese medicine the qi, the vital life energy, or the shui, the blood, and so forth, the different channels of the body. But the central part of the work that you've already just seen from Mario's photographs and the central part of the exhibition were those clay figures, or clay blocks on the ground. And it's important to understand that the clay blocks, unlike the welded metal figures, the clay blocks do not have any cement. They're put together, they're lying on the ground without ligatures. They're not cemented together, they're just blocks. Therefore, they invite you, at least in imagination, to think that they can be taken apart and put together in different ways. You're invited, in effect, to, as Mario said, to imagine them differently, to imagine them the way you want to imagine them, to move the elements around, to deconstruct them, to reconstruct them, there to do what you want with them. We're invited, in effect, to make them again for ourselves. And that invitation takes us back, I think, to the whole question of representation, why you want to make things. Why is our body not enough? We, after all, are all here in the flesh. Why would we want to make a copy of our bodies? Why do we want to put to see how it's put together artificially. Why do we make images? And that, in what at least I've tried to think about in relation to something, for want of a better word, let's say primordial, in what Antony Gormley has done. And I think all through Antony Gormley's work, there's a desire to get back to something primordial, original. It takes me all the way back to this. This is a lion man, comes from the Stadel cave in Germany, made out of mammoth ivory, which is called a lion man. It comes from 50,000 years before the present era, 50,000 years ago. This is one of the earliest found objects, and it's a work of sculpture. It's estimated that it took 400 hours to make this work. And what is this? We don't know what this is. Let's say everything about the culture that produced this object is inaccessible, is gone. We haven't a clue what work this object was doing for its original maker, the people who had it, but we have it. We have it from 50,000 years before the present. And what we can see in it is something I want to suggest Antony Gormley-like. Let's just say, it's imagining how the body can be made out of humans, how it can be put together out of different blocks, in effect. Putting it together out of mammoth ivory, presumably something that represented food, also for the people who lived at this time, but also representing a predator. So it's a sort of strange mix of the predator and the prey. And this object, this extraordinary object, seems to be you're able in your imagination to break it down so that you can have a human and a lion at the same time. You can imagine the body taken sufficiently apart in different units so that you can put, as they say, this primordial object, you can put a lion's head onto a human figure. And that is the beauty of this object, because I hope you see it as I do, is incredibly beautiful. Is part of the mystery of the earliest art objects that we have. This is the watch of some of you. It's not a very good slide, I'm afraid. It's the oldest, the earliest cave paintings that survive, from not quite as old as the Lion Man, but very far back in the Ardèche in France. And it is a cave full of astonishing paintings, but one of the, and no representations of humans, except this, in this strange piece of the cave that comes down. An artist from 35,000 years ago drew this strange figure, which, as you can see, has the legs of a human, female. You can see the genitals, with the head of a bull. And then surrounding, as you can see in the back, probably from a different period, with that lion's figure. But think about, again, the idea of separating the parts and putting them together in a different way. The head of a bull with the body of the woman. When I think about these objects, and for that matter, think about what Antony Gormley has done, I come up against the very peculiar fact of, at once obvious and mysterious, of art making, which is that, unlike medicine, there's no history of progress. If I have something wrong with my stomach or my gallbladder or my kidneys, I want to see a doctor who knows what's been done as recently as possible and what can be done as recently as possible, because I assume there's a history of progress in the understanding of the body that way, in the treating of the body that way. But it's not true for art. It's the strangest phenomenon that there's no history of progress that leads step by step from the Lion Man to Picasso's bull. Picasso's bull is wonderful, but it's no more wonderful than the Lion Man on the paintings on the walls of the Grand Chauvet for 35,000 years before the present. That is extremely strange. And what it means is that we look for something other than history of progress. What we look for is the ability to keep making things new, to keep coming up again and again and again without climbing the stairs towards something better, to keep thinking, how is it possible to make something new? And Antony Gormley seems to be a genius at thinking through this problem by thinking of it all the way back, giving us no instruction kit, no orientation, no guide as to how to make these objects, but asking us to try to make them new with him. And he does this in the exhibition that you've seen glimpses of. He does this in a deliberate way, deliberate in relation to China, but deliberate also in relation to all of us, by making the central figures, those blocks, out of clay. The clay is obviously crucially important in the history of China. It is the central recurrent material, obviously for Chinese, for so much of Chinese artistic creation. But it's also central in the Western tradition as well. As you probably know, the Hebrew word for the first human, the word that we translate in English as Adam, is Adamah. And Adamah means clay, the kind of clay. So God, in the Hebrew Bible, produced the first humans out of clay. Well, the first male out of clay, the first female superior to the first male was produced out of flesh, out of Adam's body. But reaching all the way back to the origins, as the Hebrew Bible imagined it, of all that exists, of humans, the dream is to get to that clay. And so Antony Gormley, I think, figured out very brilliantly a way of making the wire of China touch the wire of Western creation as well, in that material out of which he makes those blocks. And he does something else. The blocks, as you probably have seen, are not figured, as it were. They don't have designs in them. They insist upon their materiality, their clayness. And that insistence on the clayness takes us back to the origins of things. And again, in the Hebrew tradition, the Hebrew Bible, the Genesis, as you probably know, the origins of things, what was there, God doesn't create, in the Hebrew Bible, doesn't create the world out of nothing. It's a later conception, actually, Greek and then Christian conception, that God created everything ex nihilo, out of nothing. But that's not the case in the Hebrew Bible. In the Hebrew Bible, as in the Sumerian and Babylonian texts that the Hebrew Bible is drawing upon, God creates everything out of something, what the Bible calls tohu bohu. No one really knows how to translate tohu bohu. Is the Hebrew phrase. It's a untranslatable term, but it's some kind of primordial material, presumably related to the clay out of which God created the human. But that notion of creating something out of some primordial material posed a problem for Western representation. How do you represent something that precedes all representation? So in the book that you have, and I hope you look at my little essay, is called Yile, and that's because it's an allusion to the fact that in the Nuremberg Chronicle of the late 15th century, the Chronicle of Art, the artist Michael Woldenwood, trying to represent what was the very center of creation with just those letters Y-L-E. Y-L-E is a shorter form of hile, the Greek for matter, just matter, something at the very beginning of things. That wasn't, obviously, this is just 3 letters, just a word. But the artist also tried to think subsequently in the chronicle, tried to figure out how he would represent that thing, that original thing. And he did this. A little bit, it looks like looking in the window of a washing machine to me, but that's not fair. It's an attempt to represent the thing itself somehow, before anything was formed out of it, before everything becomes what it is. And that became a problem over and over again for Western artists. How do you represent the original thing before anything else has been created? And the most famous probably version of that is Bosch's Garden of the Lights of the Problem. Because Bosch represents everything in the beginning, in this panel to the left, all through the world to the end, in hell. But the fascinating thing that very few of us have actually seen properly is that the closed form, when you close the triptych wings of the Garden of the Lights, you just see this strange image, which is Bosch's attempt to represent what it must have been before anything came into form. And that representation of the original thing seems to be what throughout bodybuilding Antony Gormley is gesturing toward. It's why, there are many reasons why his art looks the way it looks, in its simplicity, in its cunning. But its cunning is a stripping away of everything till you get to the thing itself, till you see somehow the thing out of which everything is made, allowing the viewer to imagine how things come to be, and then imagining them in those figures over and over again represented different ways of putting them together, different ways of putting the blocks together, as if you could take these blocks, the same blocks, and make every conceivable shape out of them. And that's part of the thrill of bodybuilding, the idea that it's just blocks. You can move the pieces around. You can make Lion Man, you can make Bull Woman, you can do anything you want with these figures in your imagination. And that's why, finally, I think that Antony Gormley, that bodybuilding is gesturing toward the root principle, if I can put it that way, of how we all are in this room and how everything is. How is it possible that out of the same pieces of carbon, you and I exist in such different forms? Everyone exists in such different forms. How do we evolve this way? And not just us, but everything else that's alive in the world, all the other things that are made of carbon, all the other living creatures in the world. And the answer to that is something that, of course, has obsessed biologists really from the 18th century on, and becomes a central problem after Darwin. How is it possible that everything is evolved out of the same building blocks in such different forms? And the answer, to which I allude at the end of my essay, but only briefly, the answers that biologists now are coming up with is basically the principles on which Antony Gormley has created his art. That is, say, modification from common origins, but modification to the fact that you can keep doing new versions for the same materials. Novelty that arises from conserved processes, the same processes, but moving them around in different ways. Compartmentation, so that everything doesn't have to change at once. And then flexible linkages, so that you can put together the pieces in different ways. And the biologists, evolutionary biologists, who grapple with the question of how everything can exist in the very different, infinitely different ways that they exist, has basically come up with the principles by which Antony Gormley has created his magnificent catalogo. And with that, I will stop.
C'è anche un saluto dietro, adesso c'è un saluto dietro e se la regia ce lo manda, dietro non poteva venire perché oggi ha una conferenza della Royal Academy, quindi non potevamo trasportarcelo qui, allora ci ha mandato un saluto.
Hello, Mario. Hello, Stephen. I'm sorry I can't be with you today for the inauguration and celebration of this marvelous book. And be able to speak with you, Stephen. And thank you for the amazing essay that you have contributed to it. There are so many wonderful realizations that you bring to bear. Maybe the most important to me is where you say art making is equipment for living, equipment whose efficiency rests not upon an idea of progress, but upon imaginative freedom. I love the way that you compare and contrast, host this presentation of clay and seawater that floods the entire gallery, only taking form from that given by the architecture, with this work that is now playing with the idea of architecture and the idea of the body as a building. And then, the way that you talk about art-whole relations and the fact that nothing is fixed. And we now know and understood that it was a human genome that indeed nothing is fixed. But from that same range of genetic material, we derive individuality. I also love the idea that somehow, resting place is a place for us to rest and think again about our relationship to matter, to what you call the total global of great Jewish literature, formlessness. I suppose I am really interested in that fundamental link between consciousness and body, and then body and earth. And how the imagination is involved, but how the viewer's imagination is involved with the co-production of meaning. No meaning is fixed. My work is not, as you say, narrative. And I want it to be a co-production of something of value, where the reflexive potential of art becomes a tool for us maybe to understand ourselves and where we belong. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Mario. Thank you all for being there. See you soon. Bye for now.
Allora, se abbastanza, insomma. In definitiva sono delle figure più essere che noi siamo un po' come quello di centro, noi siamo negli spazi, insomma, in relazione ad altri spazi, quindi...
Mario, I have a question. In the exhibition itself, does the viewer see the objects up above from this angle, or only from?
So from here, the right side, we go inside to the gallery. We see, and we will be around the sculpture. And for that, I told before, it's dangerous if you don't put attention where you're going. Maybe you broken the sculpture, you destroy the figure. We arrive here. This is the entrance. There we have the stairs. We go up at the second and third floor, and we see from the top this image. It's not with the drone. It's a physical experience. For that, in England, we do the first resting place one in Vacuum Gallery. We have only the sensation at the same level of the piece. But in the gallery in Beijing, it's possible to go and see from up. That also changed completely the perception.
Absolutely. That's the remarkable thing. When you see it from this angle, of course you see these absolutely as bodies in various postures. When you see it from the ground, you don't immediately see that at all. You see what looks at first like a jumble of stones, blocks. So it is a very strange effect to go to see it from this angle and to see it from below.
Also, you told before, in many ways, the work of Antony talking about the town, the space where we live, the humanity is generally in the town. Now it's more large. Aspetta, parla italiano, tanto in inglese non lo capisce nessuno. No, ora abbiamo la maggior parte della popolazione del mondo adesso vive nelle città. La prima volta che succede nella storia del mondo. Quindi noi, come dire, siamo responsabili individualmente di come è il mondo, umanizzato. Questo è quello che ha senso, secondo me. Cioè l'arte ci porta a vedere qualcosa che vediamo ma che magari non vogliamo vedere, insomma. Cioè ci lascia appunto una libertà immaginativa di come potremmo anche fare questo mondo, perché in definitiva siamo noi che abbiamo preso il controllo e lo stiamo un po' distruggendo. Per esempio, per fare questo lavoro in Cina, per dire i cambiamenti, abbiamo trovato solo una fabbrica che li fa, perché per i problemi di inquinamento c'è solo una fabbrica in Cina che fa i mattoni. Quindi per convincerli a fare i mattoni sono tutte misure non industriali. Quindi è stato difficile perché sono 3 fabbriche in tutta la Cina, 1,5 miliardi di persone, è più grande dell'Europa. Sono 3 fabbriche solo in tutta la Cina che lo fanno adesso, per dire noi critichiamo il Green Deal, lì lo fanno. È una dittatura, quindi questo è anche un problema perché lì, cioè fare questo progetto lì per me era molto importante, anche avere sia il testo di Stephen che quello di Harrow, che voi avete conosciuto perché è stato il direttore del MAXXI per diversi anni. Significa andare dentro una situazione non è scontato, dove l'individuo, per come noi pensiamo, non è che è molto valutato, è più valutato, diciamo, la scala collettiva. In realtà lì l'abbiamo portato fatto. E poi questo confronto anche con l'Inghilterra, cioè, che è interessante, perché qui si percepisce, diciamo, in Occidente, come dire, gli homeless, e invece lì si percepiva al mare. Quindi non so, ecco, qualcosa su cui prendere seriamente la questione, cioè sono delle coincidenze, ma l'artista a volte ci fa vedere cose che magari non sembrano, perché è troppo difficile affrontarle, nella durezza, nella complicazione che hanno, ma che poi stanno raccontando qualcosa che poi tra un po' d'anni vediamo tutti, anticipano un mondo che sta succedendo. Quindi per me rimane fondamentale questo aspetto della libertà individuale e dell'immaginazione, ma che diventa anche fisica, diventa anche vera. Perché le dittature si stanno diffondendo comunque, c'è questo, cioè, per come diciamo abbiamo letto l'Oriente, quindi l'autocrazia, ecco, sta diventando il mondo, quindi non è che possiamo dormire, quello che stanno fermati a prendere il sole. Vabbè.
C'è una domanda.
Okay, so my question is like, if we think about like the contemporary time, I think this is the age when we think and talk the most about the body, like our body, other people's bodies, how they look, how they feel, how big they are, how small they are, like in every single aspect of the body. Maybe what we don't usually think about is like the space that a body occupies, and this is something that like struck with me on your talk about the fact that people had to basically climb upon the structures, so you were totally aware of the impact of the body in the space, which is maybe something that we don't think about very often. And also, if we think about China and Japan, maybe the impact of the body is something that also we see a lot in architecture, because basically there's no place left to build on, so they're building up. And we have like this. And when I think about living, like for a normal person like me, like the idea of living in such a place where you literally occupy like a cube, and you have that tiny space to live, it's a form of violence on the person, because you're not so free to move, not so free to live. So maybe this is something that also we can see in Gormley's work.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I have to say that I often go in the summer to Spelonga with mother when my children were here, and it doesn't look very different from on the beach on a very busy day from this. So it's not only in the Orient that you experience the simple masses of human beings in the spaces. It's our very populous world. What I guess from your very remarkable observation, I guess I would feel about Antony Gormley is that he plays back and forth between what you, I think, correctly say is an implication of violence, and I said earlier that it's like bodies on the battlefield afterwards, but also things that are not violent. Sleep, for example. When I look down at these, when I look at these figures from above, many of them look like bodies in repose, the way in which we look when we're asleep, with our legs in different positions, so that the boundary line between repose, rest, and violence is obscure in this work. We know what a certain kind of violent modernist work looks like, that insists in your face on the violence. This, I think, is much more ambiguous about how to interpret these bodies, as if it's and I felt it about myself, and then I thought so when I heard you speak, it's like a Rorschach test, in which you project great deal onto these figures, and it depends on your emotional angle, your angle of vision, your way of imagining the world. That said, it is the case that I won't speak to China where I haven't been for many years, but in Japan, it is the case that the more money you spend, the fewer people you see in a restaurant or in an inn, in a ryokan. If you spend a great deal of money, you don't see anybody. As if escaping from precisely this is the highest desire. So, to that extent, I think you're right that this work is in touch with the massiveness of the population and the inescapability of other human beings. But I want to say that there's a famous line from Sartre, hell is other people. But I don't think this is hell. I think it's somewhere between paradise and hell.
I have a feeling that this mass of people, which is in the heaven and hell, they're very much on themselves. I mean, in this work in particular, I don't see, I mean, they are very individualistic. Everybody's doing their own thing, you know, their own activity. Who sleeps, who's doing yoga, who's doing... So there's not much relation between, you know, like in a beach, you do have relationship with people. In this case, I feel that every individual has his own world, and somehow they're connected. But very, like, sort of in a silent and own way of kind of meditative also, because some of them, they're really in a pose of meditation, I think. So there is a mass, but there's also a lot of silence. That's what I...
Yes, that seems correct to me. I mean, I didn't show you, and I don't think you showed, that there are several metal sculpture pieces in which there are two bodies together. Yeah, but here not, you're absolutely right. Here, each body is, as it were, contained in its own form. And no one is touching, no body is touching another body. That's absolutely true. And maybe that goes back to some sense of loneliness in the middle of the crowd.
Which is our way of being.
Yes.
C'è in the book we can see, but we have not, it was not in the gallery, that you see only this is the most attractive and strong piece for that. We have talked a lot about this, but in the other part of the exhibition, we have the enemy and another work where this, after the experience of COVID, Antony talked about the necessity of they go out of and sustain each other like the unity. Also in the Bible is talk about this of the connection and the symbol with the two different parts. And for that I think is really interesting the relation because, for example, in the Chinese story, in the beginning of the birth Sofia, insomma, pronuncia bene, cioè è una dea e nava che soffia sulla terracotta impastata dalla vita agli uomini. Lì è una donna che genera la vita per noi è il soffio vitale arriva da Dio, sempre un uomo. Però in questo lavoro, diciamo, in questi due lavori che Antony ha fatto in Cina, è molto evidente questo rapporto, diciamo, di questi due mondi si toccano, anche se appunto chi è più il genere femminile, come a Babilonia, è una prostituta che insegna all'uomo la civiltà. Diciamo, la visione come anche i corpi di Antony, diciamo, non sono sessuati, sono spazi. Per esempio, quando abbiamo fatto la mostra di Gormley agli Uffizi, lui aveva fatto un lavoro, aveva installato un'opera vicino all'Ermafrodita, quando andrà presentata agli Uffizi. Potete immaginare questo dialogo, diciamo, sul corpo e su anche come appunto il suo lavoro, diciamo, cerca di portare la questione a un livello più profondo, insomma, e forse all'apertura di un mondo che potrebbe essere anche meglio di quello che stiamo vedendo in questi ultimi tempi, dove la violenza, il bullismo e lo stile di macismo di ritorno, insomma, sembra oscurare la possibilità di un rispetto maggiore tra le varie spazi che noi siamo.
Yeah. Maybe it's the case thinking about the point that you made about the spaces between separating these figures, that the humans who walk across them are making the viewers who cross over are making making them touch, but it's through their own movement that somehow connections are being made. And maybe that's part of the experience that Antony Gormley is intending to give. He has an uncanny eye for the way in which I feel it sitting here, that the way I'm holding my body, I'm very like that. Whether I put my legs this way, whether I put it this way, whether I lean back. He has a very, kind of like that. He has a very good eye for how humans hold themselves in different postures. Yeah.
Questa è una doppia figura.
Yeah.
Si sono dei lavori che sono nati poi ispirati alla pietra, i primi lavori di questo tipo furono presentati a San Gimignano nella mostra che ha fatto nel 2020, non mi ricordo bene. Gli anni del Covid sono un po' tutti confusi, però si ispirava un po' a questo, una figura che sostiene l'altra. E poi appunto Pechino, diciamo, è stata chiusa 4 anni, quindi sarebbe stata la prima grande mostra che abbiamo fatto dopo il Covid, e ho voluto, diciamo, molto che fosse aprire questo tipo di situazione rispetto alla Cina, perché lui ha realizzato dal 95 al 2003-2004 una grande opera fatta di 200.000 piccole figure realizzate in una città vicina a Guangzhou, che si chiama Field, che è nella collezione del museo MAXXI di Hong Kong, dove abbiamo presentato il libro insieme a Umaru, appunto perché Umaru ha raccontato i 30 anni di Gormley in Cina. Quindi insomma questa Cina, diciamo, è molto presente nel punto di domanda che Antony sta ponendo un po' in tutto il mondo dove lui va a fare le mostre.
You've seen his studio in England.
Yes.
And does it work with a large team of people?
I have two places. One is in Roma, and the other one is at the foundry in the north of England. I was the first time after 20 years to see the foundry. And that is really interesting because this foundry, questa è un film that was involved with 300 people local, one small town in Guangzhou area. And it's the opposite of come si chiamano, i guerrieri, quelli sono stati trovati non so pronunciare, i famosi guerrieri, diciamo, che sono figure di soldati in sede dell'imperatore, invece mi sono proprio i cittadini. Un po' per me nel piccolo, quello che avevamo fatto a Poggiomonzi, perché a Poggiomonzi Antony ha voluto coinvolgere gli abitanti del paese. È stato l'unico artista su 89 artisti che hanno fatto arte all'arte che ha cercato il contatto con i cittadini del posto. E per me, siccome era l'ultimo anno che facevamo arte all'arte, io ero pieno di debiti, dovevo pagarmi, non potevo più continuare, fu una specie di regalo, perché, cioè no, fu un regalo proprio anche, ma il fatto per cui abbiamo voluto parlare con le persone, cioè lui ha istruito me sulle persone che io conoscevo da quando ero piccolo, cioè diciamo lì l'artista per me mi apre gli occhi, mi fa vedere qualcosa che, cioè ce l'ho sotto gli occhi ma non la vedo, è quello che ti permette in qualche maniera di non rimanere ispirato dove credi di sapere, credi di conoscere e anche di dare indicazioni all'arte. L'artista, come diceva Stephen, parla in un altro modo, cioè, ti presenta qualcosa e apre un'altra possibilità, ecco. E quello secondo me è la parte migliore che abbiamo coltivato in Occidente, che è importante non perdere, è sempre una cosa, diciamo, a rischio, non è gratuita. E quindi, cioè, per me l'arte è anche un modo per vivere, cioè seguire quello che vale la pena tenere in considerazione, e sono contento che Stephen sia venuto perché per me anche lui è una persona che ci può insegnare delle cose molto profonde e anche giuste, quindi leggete i libri perché lo sa aiutarci.
May I ask something?
May I ask you something about the perspective that we've seen on the piece of art, and especially because we've seen that two different versions had a different point of view. Of course, we had the point of view from upstairs and then the point of view from downstairs. And my question is, if the artist wants to give a message somehow, or highlights the fact that from different point of views, we can see these pieces of clay as architectures, as you said, and for him it's most important, as you say, the Adam part, so the clay as the soul of the human being, but he doesn't want to give a message about if the world is overloaded of people, or if it's actually doing some yoga or meditation, as she said. So the question is if you think that Gormley wants to give a message, or he just leaves these human beings as they are, and then everyone of us has his own point of view.
Yeah, it's a question not only, I think, it's a wonderful question not only about Gormley, but really about any complex artist in sculpture, in painting, in literature. There's not an infinite number of things, I think, that you can get from any single work of art. You have guidance, you have questions such as the ones that came up now, that come up because of the disposition of these bodies in space. So it's not a completely open field, otherwise we wouldn't have the sense that there's an actual controlling artistic vision. On the other hand, I think that there is no, how should we say, there's no guidebook here, there's no instruction book to tell us how to interpret these objects, any more than there's an instruction book that tells us how to interpret Hamlet. That is to say, there's lots of different, there are lots of different ways of seeing what's going on, lots of different ways of interpreting the disposition, as we've just seen, of these bodies. And I think Gormley knows that. I don't think he wants to make sure that you go left and you swipe left and not swipe right, as they say. I mean, I think he wants you to have a choice and make the choices yourself, and perhaps make one choice in 1 hour or one day and another choice in the other day. But there's not an infinite number of possibilities, as they say, because I do think that, at least now, having spent a lot of time thinking about these, I now think that I know what an Antony Gormley looks like. There's a certain Antony Gormley manner, and it doesn't translate into an ideological position, left or right, environmentally this or that, but it's a vision, and you enter into his world, and then you find that within his world, you actually have room to maneuver, room to choose, as if you're stepping over those bodies yourself, as you do, in fact, in this exhibition. So, for me, a sign of Antony Gormley's strength as an artist is what I feel in a great poem, in a great play, which is not that I'm being told, I'm being given a message that I can carry out and write on a note card or a postcard and send it to someone, but I'm being given an experience of choice, of interpretive freedom. More than that, we'd have to go together to the exhibition hand in hand and have a conversation about what we're seeing, I think, to know where each of us is in relation to these, I think, quite remarkable and beautiful objects. I can't imagine, by the way, and I must go myself, I can't imagine what it is to live with one of these for a very long time. I'd be curious as to what it is to actually have one of these and live with one. And would I want to move the pieces around? Would I see them from different places? Not, 132 of them, or however many there are in this room, but one. And what it would mean to actually to live in close proximity to one, like living with one's partner. I can't imagine, I don't know what it is.
This is one sculpture. 132 is one piece that will remain a lot of time in our restaurant. I hope we will do another show part of the world, but Antony made the other work in clay, but not in this form. It was exposed the first time in the Uffizi. It was the figure of the fetal position. Also, with the based in the weight, cioè con la forza di gravità non erano connessi, anche questi sono liberi. Quindi come diceva Stephen, possono essere ricostruiti anche perché Antony ha delle idee molto chiare su come farle, per cui anche adesso le abbiamo smontate, sono state smontate esattamente, perfettamente.
Quanto pesano una di queste?
Dipende dalla grandezza, comunque massimo peserà 5 kg. Antony, quando è venuto alla mostra, le abbiamo giocate tutte, è stato proprio alle ginocchiere e le ha spostate tutte.
5 kg del mattone? 5 kg del mattone? 5 kg di pezzi?
I più grandi sono 5 kg, i piedi sono più piccoli, sono a seconda, insomma. Ma adesso
dipende sul paper.
Però cioè lui vive con la scultura, proprio ogni pezzo è come un figliolo, quindi non è che chiaramente, come diceva Stephen, è un aspetto poetico che lui mette nelle forme, non è che fa un discorso ideologico, perché quello che è importante nell'arte, secondo me, lui sicuramente è un artista che vuole, diciamo, che cerca il coinvolgimento di quello che partecipa e va a fare, che va a vedere l'opera. È un lavoro sulla presa di coscienza del tuo posto. Il progetto di contributo si chiama Fai spazio, prendi posto, cioè decidi la tua posizione. Prendi una posizione perché quella che prendi cambia anche le altre. E quindi la questione della coscienza individuale è una questione che lui cerca di portare. Poi ci sono gli artisti che vogliono metterti nel suo mondo e ti prendono la tua energia, e quelli che io preferisco come lui invece cercare di darti la sua per farti permettere di vedere delle cose che magari non vai, quindi forse è più facile. Ora Stephen, via, lo ringrazio di averci onorato. C'è una persona, vedete la loro sui libri, non me lo voglio. È più bello.